Everybody. This is Gerry Villamil. Let me go through and start sharing my screen. Everybody should be able to see my wonderful mug as well as the header page for my presentation, tips and tricks of making EPBCS work for you and not the other way around.
Everything looks great.
Perfect. So for those that are not familiar with who I am, my name is Gerry Villamil. I've been in the space for 25 plus years. I capped it at 25 because it just starts showing my age. But started with a company Arbor Software, which is the original creator of the Essbase technology that sits underneath EPBCS. At that time, the company was 35 strong. And obviously, for those that have been in the space for quite a while, know the success of Arbor Software and how it became Hyperion Solutions and ultimately acquired by Oracle, the Oracle software company. So from a company perspective, Premeeting Analytics is a boutique consultancy. All we do is focus on enterprise performance management, anything that's EPM. So EPBCS, FCCS, ARCS, etc. So we do anything within the EPM framework, but for Oracle. So we don't consult on any other technologies, even though we're familiar with those technologies, but we try to focus our attention within Oracle. The agenda for today is obviously talking about Promethean. I'll go into one additional slide on our experience, but the bulk of the presentation will be focused on tips and tricks around EPBCS. And then for those that are not familiar with the differences between enterprise planning, budgeting, cloud services versus normal planning, budgeting, cloud services, I'll have a slide that actually goes through and kind of talks through those particular flavors and versions. Especially now with Oracle going through and really trimming down the number of SKUs that are available, it does pose a little confusion. So we'll actually go into that. Then the rest of the hour will be focused on specific tips and tricks, some general tips around how to leverage the frameworks and how to leverage some of the performance features available within planning, budgeting, cloud services. And then we'll go into Q&A. So Promethean experience level has, well, let me put it this way. We've been involved with the technology literally to the early days of the Essbase or Arbor Software. So I was involved with Essbase 2+. So when I first came on board out of finance, I was tasked to support all the Arbor customers that had Essbase 2.x. The software started with 2, it didn't start with 1. So I've been basically supporting the technology and consulting on the technology since the very early days of Arbor Software. As the technology advanced, we did a lot of consulting on Hyperion planning on-premise, as well as Consolidation Cloud, or pardon me, Hyperion Financial Management, and then obviously Consolidation Cloud. And then now, all flavors of PBCS when it comes to planning, budgeting, cloud services. I actually spent a lot of time within Hyperion, six years at Hyperion, and an additional 6 years at Oracle, basically selling services as well as helping guide our customers while at Oracle onto the technology stack as well as into planning cloud. One of the claims to fame within our company is that we actually release multiple versions of accelerators, and an accelerator is a true accelerator. It's what it is a particular vertical or horizontal application that is all-encompassing. It has all the forms, has all the calculations, it has dashboards. It basically is an accelerator into your application. So as we built those accelerators, we wanted to take advantage of all the performance features that are available within Planning Cloud. So a number of the features or tips that I'm going to show you are already incorporated into this accelerator. So we have accelerators for For merchandise and retail, we have accelerators around position planning and higher ed, and position planning and normal for-profit companies, as well as normal employee-based workforce applications. We also have a vertical in life sciences, as well as a vertical in higher ed, as I mentioned earlier. So some of the key principles that we're going to be going into is, obviously, we're going to talk about frameworks. And for those that are not familiar with frameworks, Oracle released 4 major modules during the early days of Hyperion planning. So a module within workforce, financials, workforce, capital, and projects. With the introduction of cloud, they introduced another module or framework called financial statements. Now, Oracle no longer refers to those as modules, they refer to as frameworks, because it allows you to establish your specific planning process around that framework. A lot of customers tend to be a little, or certain clients tend to be overwhelmed with those frameworks, and therefore they tend to go with custom models. And I highly recommend that you leverage those frameworks, because first, they open up a custom plan type for future purposes, and also there's a lot of feature and functionality within those. As long as you understand how those frameworks work and you stay within the embrace those frameworks, then I think you'll enjoy them. So our second principle is to leverage ASO for reporting. So out of the box, Oracle doesn't leverage any of the reporting cubes per se for bringing the data from those frameworks into something that very quickly can be aggregated. So out of the box, the frameworks are as is. You know, you configure them, you plan in them, and then you have to aggregate them. And at times, depending on the size of your model, the aggregation time can be somewhat time consuming. So, for example, all our accelerators, even though we leverage the frameworks, we automatically tie them into the reporting cubes. So as soon as you click save, you immediately can go in and report on your income statement at a total division level, total subsidiary level, all employee level. So it's very important to understand what you get with the tool, and it's very easy to go in and configure your solution to leverage those reporting cubes. One of the things that Oracle had released, it's been approximately a year, but they enabled hybrid for your frameworks. So now, and your custom models, excuse me. So hybrid or BSO hybrid gives you the ability to automatically aggregate the data on the fly within your BSO cubes or your frameworks. The beauty of that is that if you need basic aggregation within your model, it's available to you, and it's very easy to implement. The only thing that you need to do is make sure that you turn that on before you actually architect your application or configure your application. If you do it post configuration, then there's a possibility that you may have to do a rebuild or redesign to take advantage of the features of hybrid. Okay. All our accelerators within Promethean take advantage of BSO hybrid. And I have to apologize. I'm dealing with a cold, so I'm trying to recover from that. Another key principle is get in the groove, or get into Groovy. Groovy is a game changer for EPBCS. It allows us to do optimization, apply optimization factors within our models that we were never able to do prior to Groovy. It also allows us to go through and interact with data management, interact with the job factory. It allows us to do certain things that can handle automation without having to leverage EPM Automate. So there's a lot of things that Groovy leverages for us and allows us to do within our models that we weren't able to do pre-Groovy. Okay, so we'll actually go into some tips and tricks on leveraging Groovy within your models and how easy it is to take advantage of it. And the last key principle is don't assume that Oracle knows best. You know, Oracle, obviously, they're putting an application together via their development teams. They're obviously extremely knowledgeable and extremely smart in their areas of expertise, but they're trying to build an application that's all-encompassing, that will span multiple verticals and multiple horizontals. And at times, it may not be optimized for your particular environment, for your particular business process. So always assume that maybe they may not have your best interests at heart for optimization. You may have to go in and optimize and tune your model for your specific business process. As I had mentioned earlier, that there's, with Oracle going through and kind of trimming down the SKUs, at least on the Oracle side, and also with the acquisition of NetSuite into the Oracle family, there are multiple flavors of EPBCS out there. So I wanted to make sure that I go through that because some of the tips are specific to EPBCS, and I'll try to point those out as we're going through that. First, the all-you-can-eat enterprise suite basically is one of the flavors that Oracle offers, and is the one that Oracle obviously is pushing. It gives you the ability to have all of the EPM, the whole EPM stack available to you. So EPBCS, FCCS, ARCS, EDMCS, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all that is available to you. The beauty of Enterprise Suite is all features are supported. So you get all your custom BSO plan types, you get all your frameworks, you get all the ASO plan types, and Groovy is available for custom programming optimization. The next level down is for those that have purchased NetSuite. So NetSuite NSPB, which is basically PBCS Plus or EPBCS Lite, for some of those that are aware of this, is that you get all your custom BSO plan types, maximum 3. You get the financial statement framework, so you get one of the frameworks. You get 4 ASO plan types versus Enterprise, so you get a minimum of 7. And Groovy is available because as soon as you implement one of the frameworks, the Groovy becomes available, and they have given you that ability to create custom code with Groovy. Now, the last one, and this is strictly Oracle, and this is EPBCS standard, and it's the most limiting. You would think it's not, but it is definitely the most limiting. Gives you only one BSO plan type, only one ASO reporting queue, gives you all the frameworks, but you can't do anything. I mean, in regards to optimization. So I can't leverage Groovy to improve my overall performance of my model. I can only do basic calculation scripts using the calculation manager. So it's the most limiting. Most of our tips and tricks will be focused on the top 2 SKUs, the Enterprise Suite and NetSuite NSPB. So let's go into our first set of tips and tricks. So leveraging frameworks. So some people may not say this, but I do. Leverage your frameworks. Custom is king. And what do I mean by that? Okay. You only have 3 BSO plan types, 3 custom plan types. So the last thing you want to do is suck up all those plan types, those custom plan types for general planning purposes. For example, if you're for financial statement planning, why use a custom plan type if Oracle already provides you a framework that you can customize for your purposes? And that leaves a custom plan type open for future planning processes like marketing, planning around your marketing endeavors, or planning around your sales endeavors, etc. Okay. You have to remember that even though the framework is somewhat rigid, it still can be manipulated and still can be customized to meet your requirements. So in all our accelerators, we always use the financial statement framework as for financial planning. We just customize it for the purpose of the client. And since we use ASO for reporting, the client doesn't have to see any of the extraneous system dimensions that Oracle forces us to use. We can remove that or rename that to be specific to their requirements. When you're configuring, make sure that you try to configure the least amount of features as possible, okay, with certain caveats. So when we go through and configure, say, financials, we literally configure only two things: configure expense and configure revenue, and only for accounts. We don't configure anything else. What we try to do is keep everything minimalistic, because you can always turn something on in the future, but you can't roll anything back, right? So when you start turning on driver-based planning, it adds a lot of extraneous members within the model that you may not even leverage, especially if you're not using driver-based planning. So we say a minimalist approach is best, but the one caveat is that you need to make sure that you understand your dimensional architecture up front, okay? Do you need a department's dimension? Can entities manage both your subsidiaries and departments as one dimension, therefore you don't need that? Do you need a potential, say, a site or location dimension? What are the dimensions that you need to handle your reporting or handle your planning processes? You need to know that up front, because if you decide after the fact to add a dimension, that's a rebuild process. I mean, Oracle has not yet come up with the ability to add a dimension after the fact. So remember that going into your frameworks. And then, even though I keep saying that frameworks and custom is king and leverage your frameworks, there are times when frameworks aren't a great fit. You know, for example, the projects framework. Projects framework has an immense amount of features and functionality built in there, but for most clients, it's extremely overwhelming. So at times, what we'll do is actually build a custom projects model and scale it down and give you the features that you need to be able to perform your planning process. Secondly, projects is very rigid. You only have one custom dimension. So if you need to add multiple custom dimensions, you're out of luck. Okay, so that's where at times frameworks in this particular instance may not be a great fit for you, and kind of think out of the box. But always think, can I leverage my frameworks first? And then if not, then use a custom. As I had mentioned earlier, frameworks are fantastic if you know how to work with them. They tend to be a little rigid. Okay, so you have to make sure that when you're working with frameworks, you work with them with a little caution. Okay, so the frameworks first are built for planning; they're not built for reporting. Okay, and that's why when we go through and implement the frameworks, we are always leveraging Smart Push to push into our ASO reporting cubes. So adds a little bit of time into the configuration. You have to make some modifications to the existing forms, but you'll see a massive amount of improvement when it comes to performance as well as enhanced reporting, okay? Also, don't assume that the business rules are highly optimized. For example, some of the rules that come with Workforce tend to be slower than if you went through and just created a more tuned script for your purpose. Secondly, when we're going through it and looking at financials, at times we'll leverage the financials framework and say we'll leverage trending, but some of the trending methods may not be specific to the client's requirements. So we'll actually create a custom rule that's more targeted, and at times it could be faster. Okay, so just never assume that Oracle's always giving you the most optimized framework. Okay. Smart List. We use Smart List extensively within our models. Why? Well, Smart List obviously gives you the ability to see textual values instead of numbers within your cells, but you can also leverage Smart List as reporting dimensions. So instead of in your planning cube, you reference a Smart List, but as it's being pushed into the ASO cube, we convert that smart list into an actual dimension. So you can report against it, you can do analysis against it. It gives you a lot of flexibility, okay? So take advantage of the smart list, and then either use an ASO push or use a Groovy push to real dimensions, okay? Finally, in regards to variables, we use user variables extensively within our model. Obviously, for those that are familiar with user variables, it's a little frustrating that you have to set those user variables up front for every planner, but it's a one and done, okay? So you get it done once and you don't have to revisit it again. But the beauty of the user variables is you can name the variables specific to that particular form. So if you are referring to a reporting department, you can actually call that user variable reporting department and reference the department dimension versus all of a sudden have this generic user variable called department or called entity. Leverage the functionality of that user variable. It'll actually be easier in the long run and provide a better user experience for your planners. Now, we tend to leverage two major frameworks extensively: workforce as well as financials. So workforce, the beauty of workforce is that obviously it's full featured, has a lot of out of the box forms and a lot of pre-configured rules. So for customers, you get a lot of functionality built into that particular framework. Now that's one of the cons. Because it's so full featured, it can be extremely overwhelming. Also, because it has to handle all the requirements across multiple industries, across multiple verticals, at times, some of those requirements are overkill for new companies or companies that have existing processes. Also, it doesn't really fit well with payroll systems. You know, payroll systems, when you go through and extract the data and get your flat file or connect directly to that payroll system, they're normally referencing hire dates and termination dates, transfer dates, etc. Whereas the workforce framework uses the period members and the year members. You know, that person was hired in January in fiscal year 2019. Doesn't give a date of exactly when that person was hired. Doesn't give an actual termination date of when that person was departed the company. So it tends to throw off clients. Okay, clients prefer to see those payroll dates. So what do? We went actually leveraged that workforce framework, took the skeleton of it, and we added those particular enhancements to it to support typical payroll systems, okay, and support typical formats that our clients are looking for. So it gives you the ability to support all the hire, transfer, termination data approach, supports intra-month hires, departures and transfers. All that's in our accelerator, and that's stuff that you can leverage within your own model. Kind of think out of the box, and you can actually take advantage of that, okay? Now here's an example of the basic workforce. You'll see here, this is just the demo model where you'll see your employee, their job role, what type of employee they are, and then their merit month and their start month. You don't actually see, the date that they came in. If I want to determine when they departed, it's not immediately visible to the planners. Whereas here's the exact same workforce framework, but customized for a better approach, in my opinion. Okay, a better approach to workforce, and it gives you the ability to see the start date, job titles, employee dates. This is actually position based, so you can actually see the actual position or seat that individual is attached to, and then if you are dealing with pro formas, doing a lot of acquisitions, and you have any synergistic efficiencies by the acquisition of that new company or new subsidiary, you can actually apply a synergy flag to that, and it will actually report appropriately for your pro formas. Okay, so you can see that there's a lot of information here quite a bit different than what you see above. I apologize, I had to cough. Okay, now in regards to tips and tricks from a financials perspective, again, as I mentioned earlier, we use financials extensively. Almost 95% of our accelerators for our clients have financials configured. So again, financials is very full featured, lots of out of the box forms, lots of pre-configured rules. The biggest con, if there is one, but I would say that there's a few, but the biggest con is that it tends to be overwhelming for new adopters. So new adopters, they're normally comfortable in just Excel, okay? They're normally doing a bottoms-up type of financial plan. So all of a sudden we show them financials framework, and it's there's a lot of feature functionality, driver-based, trend-based, direct input. It just, the very first thing we hear is, oh wow, I mean, this is a lot, you know, quite overwhelming. We normally don't use this. That's fine. You still can use the financials framework. Scale it down. You know, go in and maybe just release direct input as well as trending, because trending, I think, is a godsend for financial analysts. I mean, when I was a financial analyst, I remember doing all my individual forecasts on a monthly basis and stuck at my desk till 11:30 in the evening, especially when we're finalizing the forecast. Being able to very quickly build out your forecast based upon historical trends, I mean, it's amazing, and it's a feature that's immediately available. So why not leverage it, right? So as I had mentioned, you can go through, take advantage of the specific features. You still can leverage financial frameworks for those planning customers or customers that have a more mature planning process. You can augment it, you can update it or customize it to your specific features, and then leverage ASO for all the reporting. Now let's get into the true meat. A lot of people are very interested in this. Groovy, okay? I always use this term, get in the groove. Groovy is the game changer for EPBCS. For those that are NetSuite customers, you are PBCS Plus, which basically means you're EPBCS, okay? It just means that you have a licensing requirement that you can only implement one framework, okay? So what is Groovy? Groovy is a framework for Java, okay? So basically it allows, it encapsulates a lot of Java code into basic functions. Oracle has released a multitude of functions that help to work with basic calculations, help control your model, can even do refreshes. There's quite a bit of functionality that has been built within Groovy by Oracle. Take advantage of that. It's object-oriented, so it allows you to go through and take those functions and be able to re-leverage those functions across multiple areas. It's a standard across many applications, so it's not just for EPBCS. You'll be able to, Groovy is being used across the whole EPM stack, okay? From a creative uses case, you can use real-time data validation for Groovy. You can perform calculation on only edited cells. Biggest game changer. You have the ability to go through and manipulate and move dynamic members to different parents. You have the ability to create members on the fly. You have the ability to move and push data from one plan type to another. You have the ability to create custom strips based on scenario. And this is something that we're going to go into as one of the slides later on. So best use case is dramatically improve the performance within your business rules. Why? Because in the past, you're dealing with forms that would launch a basic business rule, and at times those business rules would just say, hey, you know, calculate this whole form or aggregate this particular dimension. Didn't take into account how many members you were changing, if you even were you even touching a particular set of departments. You know, it was agnostic of your form, right? With Groovy, it allows you to capture those cells that have changed and really customize or hone your business rules to those changes, okay? So here's a basic business rule. You see one here, I go through, I'm fixing on the all my market members at the lowest level, I'm fixing on all my product members at the lowest level, I'm calculating product revenue, okay? In the past, I would have to focus on everything, even though I was only editing one thing. But with Groovy, I can go through and start to take that business rule and move it into a Groovy rule. Now look at the basic difference. You know, here's the basic business rule. Here's a Groovy rule, okay? No difference. The only difference is that in Groovy, I have to encapsulate that business rule within these particular commands. So basically I'm saying, hey, let's create a calc script, and the calc script is going to be this, and then let's launch it, okay? So that's a basic Groovy rule. Not hard, right? I just took my basic business rule and it's just encapsulated into those two commands, and now I have a Groovy rule. So if I just went through, created a Groovy rule and just did this, that's my business rule. Now Groovy has a little overhead associated to it. So if I went through and just ran this Groovy rule as it is, it's actually gonna run a little longer than the previous business rule, okay? So we can't stop there, okay? We need to be able to go through and really take advantage of some of the features that are available through Groovy. So here is where we go through and look at this particular form. And here we have a form that has, you know, markets and products. And you'll notice that I'm just changing certain cells. Well, we want to be able to have that Groovy rule only capture the specific product, the specific market that is being changed, right? So here's an example where you have some Groovy code that is capturing the changed cells within this particular form, okay? And what it's going to do is taking those changed cells, and it's going to create a rule that basically inserts the market or the department or the region, whatever, into that Groovy rule, and only the products that change. So now instead of calculating all of the markets for all the products, I'm only calculating one market for two products. So if that rule, let's say, took 3 minutes to run, this rule takes seconds to run, okay? So even though Groovy may have a little overhead, we've eliminated that overhead because we've had a significant savings in time between one rule versus the other, okay? Now, here's that basic business rule. If you remember to my very first example of my Groovy rule, where it showed that basic calc script embedded within the two commands within Groovy to this rule. So here's where I'm taking just an all-encompassing Groovy rule and now saying, hey, let's only apply or calculate the specific changes that have occurred within this particular form. So the top command here, or a set of commands, what it's really doing is saying, hey, you know, capture all the cells that have, or all the members that have physically been touched within that particular form. So it's capturing any markets, any products. If I have multiple versions within my grid, it'll also capture the specific version that has changed. So it allows me to really target my calculation script to that version, market, product combination that has changed on the model. And it automatically inserts it in here. So you'll see here, this S versions, it's capturing the version that has changed. The markets, S markets, is capturing all my markets that have changed, even though there's only one. But if I touch multiple markets, it'll actually put a common delimited list within this fix. And then the S products will put a common delimited list for my products and run my calculation. This last statement here, what it does, it goes through and then captures, it prints that particular business rule and then runs it, okay? So it basically encapsulated as an actual business rule, fires it off, and it only will fire it off against those particular markets and product combinations. Now, there are many other uses for Groovy, and one of those uses is to help to minimize the total number of business rules. So in the past, if I had a planning process, and let's say I did forecasting on a monthly basis as well as planning on a yearly basis, two things would happen. Either a consulting firm would go through, or a client would go through and create two sets of forms, right? So they have two sets of forms, two sets of rules. One form would be tied to a forecast rule. Another form that maybe is tied to your budget would be tied to a budget or plan rule. Excuse me. A second approach would be one set of forms that helps them minimize maintenance, but then they would have this business rule that would have this elaborate if-else logic that says, okay, if you're doing, if the business scenario is plan, do this. If the scenario is forecast, do this, okay? If it's rolling forecast, do this other thing, right? So now what it's doing is has to cycle through all those blocks to test to see, is this rolling forecast? Pardon me, it goes through and tests for that block and say, okay, is this rolling forecast? No. Oh, is this plan? No. Oh, it's forecast. Then do that statement. So it actually slows the performance of that business rule. With Groovy, we can actually use a switch statement, and awesome. I use this through for everything. All our consultants do. So in this switch statement, it actually tests. So it goes through and says, okay, what scenario is in your runtime prompt, or what scenario got touched? And if it's plan, run this rule. If it's forecast, run this rule. The beauty of that is we eliminate the need of if-else statements, so we can really have a targeted calculation script, and it minimizes the total number of scripts within your application. So now I don't need, if I have unique scripts for forecast and budget, now I can only have one script. So I can literally, at a minimum, reduce my scripts by, a factor of 2 potentially. Okay. If I have multiple scenarios and different types of scripts for each scenario, then I could potentially reduce it even more. So I love the switch statement. It's very clean. It just, you have your switch that says, okay, we're switching off a scenario. And then for each case statement, and for those that are familiar with MDX, this is very similar to MDX here. We say, okay, case, if it's OEP plan, here I just have a little statement here that says print line. This is sends it into my log for that job and says, okay, what did this run on? It's more for testing purposes, if anything. And then it fires off the script, and then it prints the script, so they also see what that script is. If it's forecast, it'll do this particular script. So you'll see here, forecast is targeted to the forecast start year from that forecast month to the end of the year, whereas this is targeted to the whole plan start year for all of your total. I wanted to create a very simple script so it wasn't overwhelming. But it gives you the ability to go through, really take advantage of some of the capabilities within Groovy. And I mean, it's easy, super easy to take advantage of, okay? So lastly, one of the things that we want to be able to do is take advantage of Groovy in all your scripts, so all your forms. So if you are dealing with large forms and you want to make sure that you maximize the performance of those forms on save, okay? The Groovy allows us to really capture those edited cells. So it only will run that calc or the custom calc on those members that have changed. And you can actually target it to a specific cell. So if you need to actually iterate and create unique scripts that are targeted to specific combinations, Groovy also has that capability. So there's a lot of functionality, a lot of power within Groovy, okay? So from a performance perspective, remember, leverage Groovy to take advantage of what's calculated within your forms. Leverage ASO. So even though we're leveraging Groovy to improve the performance of your planning models, you still want to minimize the amount of aggregations that are occurring in those planning models. That's why we actually, in addition to only calculating those specific combinations, we also trim down the push from BSO to ASO to only specific combinations as well. So you can leverage Groovy to actually push from your block storage models to your ASO models to, again, improve the overall performance of your application and enhance your user experience, okay? Finally, remember, as I mentioned earlier, out-of-the-box rules, even though they're extremely locked down to make sure that you don't mess up the rule, okay? It also is, it's all-encompassing across all horizontals and verticals, so that's obviously a big plus. It's not always optimized, so understand that there's a possibility that you may need to optimize. Always remember that if you're going to take an existing out-of-the-box rule and change it, always create a custom rule, create your own rule, because as soon as you change that rule, Oracle will not support that will not support that from a maintenance perspective. Okay, it'll actually overlook it. So always create custom forms and custom rules. Don't ever overwrite the existing forms. Okay. Now, from additional performance techniques, a lot of this actually is performance techniques. So we've leveraged in the on-premise world. They still apply in the cloud world. A lot of these, the old performance techniques are no longer necessary, okay, because by migrating over to cloud, but there's still certain techniques when it comes to calc scripts that are still valuable. So in regards to caches, usually less cache is better. So I see a lot of times where they'll use calculator cache that is extremely large. It actually will impede performance, not improve performance. So you always want to make sure that you try to use as minimal of a calculator cache as that you require. Okay, don't just throw in some massive number and assume that it's going to improve performance. Secondly, we're always trying to improve our business rules by minimizing the number of passes through the database. Every time you have to pass through the database, that could potentially double your calculation times. So we're always trying to look at your business rules and see how can we minimize the total number of passes through the blocks. Fixed parallel. Fixed parallel is a massive improvement. It was introduced a number of years ago. Allows us to parallelize our calculation across threads, not CPUs, but threads. Okay. Sometimes at times people use threads and CPUs synonymously, but it's not really truly the case, but still gives you a lot of performance improvement. So for fixed parallel, try to leverage fixed parallel across dimensions that you're calculating. Let's say that you're running a calculation for calculating product revenue, and you're fixing on all the individual level 0 members of the product dimension. In the past, if you did that, it would, depending on the calculation, it would put it into a serial mode, and the performance would be very slow. But by using fixed parallel, you can actually spread that across multiple threads and say, spread it across 8 threads, and it'll parallelize across those 8 threads. And performance could be dramatic in regards to that, at least an 8x improvement at times, or not maximum of 8x improvement if I'm using a fixed parallel of 8, but still take advantage of fixed parallel. Another performance improvement is to look at ladder aggregation. So ladder aggregation is basically, in the past, we would say, we would parallelize on, we would go through, let's say that I'm going through, I'm calculating 2 dimensions, aggregating 2 dimensions, aggregating products and markets, okay, or aggregating products and entities. And let's say I have a lot of products, a lot of entities. In the past, what we use is a calc parallel. So we wouldn't use fixed parallel, we use the calc parallel and just say calc dim these 2 dimensions. And the calc parallel is set to 8, it'll parallelize across those 8 threads. What we've noticed is that fixed parallel times is better from a parallelization perspective if you use a ladder aggregation. So you say fixed parallel at relative of all market members, you know, level 0, okay? And then put the fixed parallel at say 8 or 10 or 12, whatever you want to try at, decide to use. And then aggregate that second dimension, okay? So aggregate products. After, then you have a second fixed statement that says fix on all the descendants or I-descendants of markets with a fixed parallel. Again, whatever number of threads you want, 8, 10, 12, whatever. And then calc dim the product dimension, okay? Or pardon me, you fix parallel on all the products and then calc dim the market dimension. So you get the point. So basically we're using 2 fixed statements, one that's parallelizing on one dimension and aggregating that dimension. And then the other one is fixing on all the descendants of the already aggregated dimension and calculating the second dimension that we were originally fixing on. That we've noticed a minimum of a 30% improvement in performance on that. So take advantage of some of the tips and tricks and available to you within the Calc Manager and a lot of the functions that have been introduced to Oracle, and you'll be able to really improve the overall performance. And remember, Groovy is key, okay? So again, as I mentioned earlier, leverage your frameworks, leverage ASO for reporting, enable hybrid for basic reporting within your planning models, but always use ASO for your aggregations, okay? Get in the groove and always assume that Oracle doesn't know best. You know, they're very smart out there, but at times, depending on your industry, you might actually know a little better. So thank you so much. This ends my presentation. Feel free, I haven't actually seen the Q&A, so I'm gonna go through and just very quickly look at that and answer any questions, okay? So the very first question that was submitted by an anonymous attendee was, can hybrid be enabled in out-of-the-box frameworks? Okay, now, the answer is yes. Actually, you can't enable hybrid unless you have an out-of-the-box framework, okay? So that's a key requirement. So in answer to your question, the answer is yes, hybrid is enabled, but the beauty of hybrid with your out-of-box frameworks is it also applies to your custom BSO models as well, okay? With a customized workforce approach, do you end up leveraging any of the out-of-the-box forms, or do you build all custom? Great question. Yes, we actually create all our custom forms. And the reason why we create the custom forms is that, again, this is our accelerator. So you may decide that you might want to do it a little differently in your own model. But our accelerator is tuned to more payroll-like systems. So it allows us to leverage the hire dates and the term dates and position planning, et cetera. So those forms are more tuned to that. And as you have seen in the earlier slide, and you'll be able to see this deck when it gets posted, that form is quite a bit different. So we do leverage our own custom forms, but within the workforce framework, okay? And then finally, oh, there's 2 more. And finally, could you use the Groovy switch trick for use case of business rules that run only for edited cells versus a catch-all use case that runs for all entities or all customers? Answer is yes, I do that all the time. So we actually have a business rule, perfect example, that only captures the cells and then it passes it into the switch that runs custom business rules. So the answer is a definitive yes for that, okay? So thank you so much for tolerating my intermittent coughing through my presentation. Thank you so much for attending my presentation. And I hopefully one day look forward to all meeting you at some form or fashion in an actual conference that we're all attending. Thank you so much.